lot of breaking news coming from Vladimir Putin this hour. A lot to say. He weighed in on long-range missiles, whether or not we're going to give targets to Ukraine for long-range missile sites that would be struck within Russia, potentially. He talked about Finland and Sweden. He talked about whether or not cutting off energy sources from Russia and sanctioning countries that buy energy from Russia. He says, you know, it doesn't matter. We will have all the energy we need. We can get around that. He even mentioned the assassination of Charlie Kirk. He called it disgusting. Also, he made new comments about his summit with President Trump in Alaska, saying that he is ready to keep talking about the war in Ukraine.
President Trump and I barely discussed any issues there, even on the bilateral agenda. We only discussed the possibilities and ways to resolve the Ukrainian crisis. Overall, that's already a good thing. In my opinion, President Trump, I've known him for a long time, likes to shock a little. We all see it, the whole world sees it. But he's basically the kind of person who listens. Oddly enough, he listens, hears, and reacts.
So interesting. And obviously, he's very aware that the audience there is President Trump and the American people. John Roberts of America Reports and former White House reporter, longtime White House reporter, joins us with his thoughts on this, having covered this conflict for a long time. John, you know, there's a lot coming here. He just moments ago, he stopped speaking at this economic summit in Sochi, but pretty much everything he has said has been a headline crossing on our urgent wires. What's your takeaway so far, John?
I thought it was interesting, sort of the dichotomy between the way he sees Europe and the way he sees the United States. He believes that Europe is escalating the Ukraine conflict. He even went so far as to say that European trainers or instructors are actively participating in combat operations. He said it's folly, it's ridiculous to think that Russia is going to attack NATO, so why is there this NATO buildup? So he sees Europe as a potential adversary for Russia, and he said we're monitoring this threat, and if need be, we will counter that threat, and we'll do it in a way that will be very vigorous and substantial. But then on the other hand, he talks about President Trump saying that there's not any hypocrisy in what Trump says, suggesting that there is in what Europe is saying. Said that he speaks very directly, communicates his interests and desires directly with no hypocrisy. He also said, and I think this is a big headline, that it is Russia's intention to restore full-fledged relations with the United States. So it sounds like at some point he wants to make nice with President Trump, though President Trump is incredibly frustrated with him because he goes on the phone, Martha, and he talks with Vladimir Putin about ways to end the Ukraine war. He told me in a private session with me, he says, you know, on the phone, Putin says the right thing, and then he turns around and he does something completely opposite. So I think that Putin probably knows that President Trump is very frustrated with him and would like to maintain that relationship with the United States. But the best way to do that, according to President Trump, end the war in Ukraine and do it soon.
So, John, one of the things that he is very forceful on this is the issue of Tomahawk missiles. And President Zelensky, for some time, has requested the ability to use long-range missiles that would hit as far as Moscow. And he even said recently that, you know, we may not even have to use them, but we just have to have them in order to get to a position of leverage in this war with Russia. And Putin spoke about Tomahawk missiles. He said that would be an escalation. That would be essentially a game changer in all of this. President Trump has always, up until this point, said no to the long-range missiles on the weapons list that has been requested. Bear with me here while I play this piece of the interview, because I asked Vice President Vance about this last week on Sunday, and then I want to get your thoughts on this, John. But would you be okay with them having Tomahawk missiles and the threat that that would pose and the possible escalation it would pose? Because there was a time when you were very much in favor of, you know, backing away from this situation in terms of our support of Ukraine.
It's something the president's going to make the final determination on. What the president is going to do is what's in the best interest of the United States of America. That's the driving light between his foreign policy decisions, between his defense policy decisions, and that will be the same heuristic that we apply to how we answer this question about Tomahawks. I'll let the president speak to it, but I know that we're having conversations this very minute about that issue.
And John, Reuters is reporting that, let me get to the headline here, U.S. to give Ukraine intelligence on long-range energy targets in Russia. Your thoughts, John?
You know, it could be a lot of saber rattling. I think that actually giving Ukraine Tomahawk missiles would be an escalatory game changer. Remember that the United States first provided Ukraine with the HIMARS missiles, which only went a small number of miles. And then there was pressure to give them the ATACMS missiles, which the United States then did, which will go to a range of about 180, 200 miles. But to give them missiles that could reach deep into the heart of Moscow itself with the tremendous amount of force, 1,000 or 2,000 pound warheads, I think would be a game changer that President Trump probably wouldn't want to actually proceed on. But just the threat of it might be enough to move Putin. So it could be a little game of cat and mouse here. Nothing more than sort of that thought. Don't have any inside information, but I just don't know how you give Ukraine missiles with that power that could hit deep into the heart of the Russian power structure.
Well, we know that President Trump has been very aggravated, to say the least, in terms of what you spoke about, John, that he would get assurances from Putin. And then not only did we see deadly attacks in Kyiv, killing people in the middle of the city in places that had not been struck before in the war, but then you've got these incursions of drones and in some cases fighter jets flying over NATO countries in NATO airspace. And here's what Putin said about that. The hysteria about Russian drones in Europe is contrived to distract from the problems in the West. Thoughts on that one, John?
Sounds like typical Putin speak.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if you are sending drones and other aircraft into sovereign airspace as a provocative move, and then you say, oh, I don't know what they're talking about because none of that makes any sense, and they're just, you know, engaging in hysterical talk. That's just classic Putin. He issues a provocation or he conducts a provocation, then he tries to put the blame on the nation that he's provoking. So President Trump said in the Oval Office that he believes that if Russia were to send fighter jets into sovereign territory of NATO nations, that they should shoot them down.
That's right.
And depending on the circumstances, maybe the United States would be willing to support that.
Yeah.
We saw Turkey do that once, and it took away the Russian threat pretty quick.
Yeah, it was a dramatic moment. President Trump was asked, should these countries shoot down anything that comes into their airspace? And he simply said, yes. John, thank you very much. John
Good to
Roberts,
talk to you, Martha.
You too. Thank you so much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.